it's another month, so it's obviously another end of month video. So the first thing I watched this month was Mission Impossible 3. I watched 2 last month, and I think I watched 1 the month before. I found this to be a good improvement on the second film, and even the first to some degree. I found the action pieces to be very entertaining, and the villain played by Philip Seymour Hoffman is just so threatening and well acted, and he adds so much stakes to the film. I do think the film treats itself way too seriously at points, and there were some not great acting moments, especially with Ethan's wife. But this is still a great sequel, and I think Tom Cruise does a great job again. I'd give it a 7.5. And then I move on to Ghost Protocol. I've heard this is when the franchise gets really good, so I was really excited to watch this one, and it is really good. I feel like this film has some proper directional style from Bad Birds, without feeling like too distracting like MI2. A lot of the action set pieces I can pick out in this film and remember clearly, like the prison escape scene, the Burj Khalifa, or the cars on the platform scene at the end. They're just so unique to one another, and it just makes for such a fun watch. I like how this one doesn't take things too seriously as well, which I really wanted from this franchise. And they even brought some Peg's character from the last film to like the proper forefront for some like comic relief, which was really great to see. It's just a very solid action film in general for me. I give it an 8.5. And then I watched Rogue Nation. I feel like this was a slight step down from the last film, and it's not as memorable as some of the other films in the franchise, but it still has some great moments. I found Lane to be a very threatening and well fleshed out villain who is always in the shadows. I also like the addition of Ilsa Forst, who seems to be on like 2 sides at once, which makes her such like an interesting character in this film. Again, the action set pieces were a real standout in this film, and I like the use of cinematography to build tension, especially in the underpool like whirlpool scene. That's a proper standout in this film for me. Overall, not as good as the last, but still better than anything from the original trilogy. I'd give it an 8. And then I watched Fallout. A lot of people were saying this was like the best of the franchise, so I was really excited to go into this. But I just came out feeling it's like on the same level as Ghost Protocol. It's still absolutely amazing, obviously, because I really like Ghost Protocol. The plot in this film is probably the best of the series, and I like the return of Forst and Lane, but I found the action scenes to be just not as satisfying as the last 2 films. The bathroom scene was great, and just one of the standout scenes in the series for me, but it just kind of loses that fast-paced and well choreographed action with the rest of the film, in my opinion. I like Henry Cavill's character introduced in this film and where his character goes, and I feel like there's a blend of like humour from the last 2 films and serious moments reminiscent of the original trilogy, which I liked. All around, probably the best of the franchise, but I might just enjoy Ghost Protocol like a tiny bit more. I give it an 8.5. And then I watched John Wick. So a few weeks back, I had a substitute teacher, and the teacher couldn't be bothered to teach, and she said, put on John Wick chapter 3, and only the first 45 minutes of John Wick chapter 3, since it was only a 1-hour lesson. So basically, she kind of spoiled the franchise for me, but it made me extremely eager to check out the previous films. And this first installment is pretty solid. I like how it's really a concept as simple as revenge, and how far you can take that revenge. And it works so well with direction and acting talents as good as this. Keanu really shines in this film. The acting range is great, and I respect how he did like a majority of the stunts himself in this film. I really like the unstoppable nature of John Wick, and it's really elevated due to the great choreography and cinematography just coming together to make one of the like best action films I've probably seen. I'll give it a 9.5. Then move on to chapter 2. I had really high expectations for the sequel, and it did not disappoint. I like how they sacrificed a little bit of realism from the last film so that they could have like a more wilder story with even more beautiful action. I also think the score and the soundtrack to the film also complements the action better than the first, and makes some really like satisfying moments involved with John like hitting people. It sets up chapter 3 really well, and I think it just might be like slightly better than the first. I give it a 9.5 again. And then I watched chapter 3, Parabellum. So like I said, I already watched the first 45 minutes of it, but watching it with the context of the last 2 films this time made it much better, and I feel like the rest of the film kept up that quality of that first act. The action, I feel, is just peaked with this film. It's just so top tier, and all the set pieces just stand out from one another. It's just so entertaining from start to finish, and I like where the story goes with the high table and the consequences people face for like helping John. I think it's my favourite of the trilogy. I'm so excited for chapter 4 after that cliffhanger of an ending. I think I might give it a 9.5. And then I watched the Super Mario Bros movie. I made a review on this a few weeks back, so I don't want to reiterate too much, but I feel the animation's the best Illumination's put out. The different landscapes tropes and places in the Marvel universe are just so great to look at. The voice acting is great from a majority of the actors, especially Jack Black as Bowser. A lot of people have complained about the pace of the film, but I think the non-stop nature of this film worked pretty well for me, and I feel like they can do a bit more exploring when it comes to the sequel, I think. So overall I give it an 8. And then I watched Team America World Police. I watched this during like the middle of season 8 of my South Park binge, and I'm glad I gave it a watch because it's really enjoyable. I love the puppet style of the film. I think I've only seen that puppet style before in like Thunderbirds. It just takes it to completely new levels with massive like expansive sets and all like the puppets walking in the background and everything. You can tell they had a hard time making this film, and Matt and Trey definitely put a lot of hard work into it. The humour is just as great as South Park. Some aspects might not have aged that well, but to be honest, that's what South Park is really known for, and I feel like it manages to push the line whilst also being really, really funny. The voice acting is great from everyone in this film as well, and the line delivery works just so well with like the stiff movement of the puppets. It's just a very unique film with a style like I've never seen before. I'd give it a 9. And then I rewatched American Psycho. I've been wanting to rewatch this film for a long time now. I loved it the first time I saw it last year, and after rewatching it, it's just as phenomenal as it was the first time. Besides the amazing Sigma male energy radiating from Patrick Bateman, this film had a really interesting way of mocking the rich, whereas films like Glass Onion and The Menu like make it really obvious. I feel like this film is like a little bit more subtle. On rewatch, I really acknowledge how good this film was at being a dark comedy as well. There is some truly funny scenes that juxtapose the violent nature of Bateman, such as his extensive knowledge of 80s music, which as a fan of the 80s, it's just great to see. Speaking of, the 80s setting is really fitting for this film, and the soundtrack just makes this film what it is for me. I also tried to focus on what was in Patrick's like imagination on this rewatch, and it really made me appreciate this film so much more. There's moments where Patrick would like shout at women and like they'd have absolutely no reaction, which really gave it away on rewatch. It just goes to show how amazing the direction is from Mary Harron, and how iconic and memorable Christian Bale's acting is to generate so many memorable lines that are shared today in the form of memes. I'd give it a 10.5, bro. It's amazing. And then I watched The Big Lebowski. I was interested in checking this out because it's very highly rated for a comedy film. It was on Prime. I wanted to give it a watch, and after watching it, I think it's one of the best comedy films of all time. I love this film, from the direction to the purposely convoluted storyline. I feel like they got really creative with the like hallucination or dream sequences, and I like how it makes you like feel closer to the dude as a character by getting like more inside his head, therefore making me more invested in the story. I like how the theme of bowling is intertwined throughout the story as well, and how it all seems to come full circle at the end. The pacing really stood out to me as like being absolutely immaculate as well. There wasn't like one moment in this film where I felt like checking my phone or like daydreaming. I was just glued to the screen. The humour is great. Sometimes it can be really subtle, but then you have moments with the main trio of characters that are really funny, and the dynamic of these characters is just really great. The ending is kind of like melancholic, but also in a dark kind of way. It's kind of the funniest thing they could have done in a film like this. I think it's perfect. I give it a 10. And then I rewatched Shazam. I wanted to rewatch this before I watched the new one, since I haven't really watched it since it came out. After seeing this again, it's still as good as I remember, and it's just one of my favourites from the DCU, second to the Suicide Squad, I think. I think it does a great job at contrasting the dark, horror-like nature of the villain with a light-hearted hero, and I think when they clash at the end, it really works. I also like the characters themselves and the whole foster family aspect. There are some jokes that can be a little bit cringeworthy at moments, and some just don't land at all, and the CGI is surprisingly not the best, and it really like kind of distracted me, especially in the third act. But overall, it feels like a really solid coming of age story with some really serious elements woven in there. I'll give it an 8.5. And then I watch Fury of the Gods. I was excited to watch this after the first, and even though I feel like it's a step down from the first, it's still a really fun time. I like how it continues with the whole foster family being superheroes and the problems it causes with Billy. I also like the focus on Freddy in this film, as I really liked him in the first, and Jack Dylan Grazer really gets to show us some really great acting talent in this film. A big problem for me is the villains. I just found them to be very forgettable and uninteresting, and instead of working together to just like argue for the whole movie, I get that's supposed to be like the whole joke of them but it doesn't make them that threatening at all. A lot of people have also brought this up, but Billy in the god form acts so differently to how he acts in human form, and it's really distracting and it really frustrates me. Zachary Levi just feels like he's playing an entirely different character and not a 17-year-old boy who's starting to show maturity. The third act just started to drag a bit as well, and there was a very weird Skittles product placement. The foster family aspect is really what ties this film all together and makes it still a great film in my opinion. I think it's a good addition to the DCU. I'd give it a 7. And then I watched Smile. This was on Paramount Plus and I was interested to check this out since I heard good things about it from last year. I'm not that good with jump scares, and there wasn't a where's the jump.com page on this film, so I was quite a bit on edge for a good amount of this film. Surprisingly, it wasn't as jumpy as I was expecting. It's not like Conjuring levels. I really like the concept of this like supernatural entity which jumps from person to person through suicide and how it affects the lead character. There's a lot of moments in the film where you really feel her dread, especially during the birthday scene, which was a proper highlight of the film for how messed up it was. It was just extremely suspenseful for most of the film, and I really didn't know if she was like going to get out of the curse or not. There were some really stupid decisions made by the main character, like when she doesn't explain what's going on properly to people, or like when the ex-boyfriend character decided to go up to the place she specifically told him not to go up to. But overall, it's a very solid horror film. I give it an 8. And then I finished watching Mandalorian Season 3. It was fine. I had hope going into this season, but the story was just not interesting to me at all. When Moff Gideon returned, I started to get excited, but I feel like it was too late then because it was the penultimate episode, and during the final episode my hope just kind of fizzled out again. I also feel like it follows the trope of messy writing that Boba Fett and Obi-Wan had, and overall I just didn't enjoy this season as much as I wanted to. It's not bad by any means. There is some great action, and as I mentioned, Moff Gideon is such an amazing villain, played expertly by Gus Fring, but it just doesn't hit the same. I'd give it a 6. And then watch Split. I wanted to continue watching the Shyamalan films with this film, which I heard is supposed to be one of his best, and after watching it I definitely agree. There's a lot of tension built up in this film, which I really like, and most of that tension is from James McAvoy's amazing performance, managing to play all of these characters and blend them together in such a natural way. The cinematography, I feel, is up there with Unbreakable, with Shyamalan's best. It gets really creative with the positioning of the shots, just making the film like even more interesting and engaging. And I really like where this film goes and how it sets up for the next film. I find it to be really solid. I give it a 9. And then watch Glass. Before going into this film, I ain't heard great things, mainly that Bruce Willis drowns in a puddle, which sounded very stupid, and it kind of was. This film was just a little bit disappointing, as we have these like 3 amazing acting talents and they decide to keep them separated for most of the film, and they don't even get out of the grounds of the mental institution. I like where Shyamalan was trying to go with the story and how he was trying to connect like the stories of Unbreakable and Split together, but it failed at giving these 2 stories a respectable and satisfying ending. Just not a good ending, to be honest. I give it a 7. And then watch Avatar: The Way of Water. I've been meaning to get around to this film for a long time now, and after finally seeing it, it's pretty good. It's not as good as many positive reviews were letting out, in my opinion. The dialogue suffers from the same problems the first film did, in my opinion, where there's just some proper cringeworthy lines, and I don't think Cameron knows how teenagers are supposed to act, because they don't say bro every 2 seconds. Besides that, the visuals are obviously stunning and the world building is great. I don't think it should have took over a decade to make, due to the story being like pretty basic, and I did find the film to drag during like the whole learning the way of the water part. But I think it's a good improvement on the first film, and it's just a beautiful looking movie in general. I give it an 8. And then I finished the month by watching Guardians of the Galaxy. I forgot to write notes on this film, but this is obviously a rewatch. I watched all the MCU films back in 2020. I was rewatching this to prepare for Volume 3, but this first film is amazing. It's just iconic in like the superhero genre now, iconic from the MCU. James Gunn's direction in this film is phenomenal. Soundtrack's great. The heart to the story is great. There's just so many hard-hitting and emotional moments contrasted with really great humour. It's just great overall. I rate it a great out of 10. So that's all of the films and TV shows that I've watched in the month of April. I'm still currently watching South Park. I'm absolutely addicted to this show now. I'm watching like analysis videos on it on YouTube. I'm currently on season 11, and I think I'm going to plan to watch up to season 15, as I heard the show goes a bit downhill from there. But currently, I'm still really enjoying it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like. If you didn't, please dislike. And you'll see a little bit.